Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for tuning in. My name is Paul Ferguson, and it gives me great pleasure to bring to you today, 10 simple strategies that's going to help you become even better with your online leads. So I just want to give you a little background on myself. So at the moment, I work for a company called Appraisee, and Appraisee is a software company that specializes in certain solutions for the automotive industry. And at the very end of this presentation, I'm going to cover one of them that I think might be of interest to you. But in the meantime, what I want to talk about is my experience before in the automotive industry. So I spent 28 years in automotive, and I did everything from salesperson, sales manager, and then I went into a kind of a European, sales director role. And one of the things I was tasked with doing when I was a director was basically to try and improve the amount of online leads and our closing ratio on it. So we had about 90 odd salespeople, working in various parts of Europe. Some were working in singular, very autonomous locations, while others worked on, say, multi-person locations and had maybe some sort of management structure. One thing was for sure is we would distribute all these leads to all these different salespeople, and the lead source was locked in, so we knew exactly that these leads could be credited when sales were made. And of course, we could then look at how that salespeople did on average on it. And on average, we closed probably about 12% of our overall leads basically turned into business. So which wasn't bad. And I was tasked to try and find out could we make any improvements of this, because what we were seeing was a big downturn in our walk-in leads and an increase on our online leads. And in order to maintain our business, we had to look at ways of improving that sort of online leads. So needless to say, when you're looking at percentages, if you see your average is 12, you're going to have people that are going to outperform that and people underperform that. So you had people that were closing at 20 odd percent while other people were doing 2s and 3s. So my job was to kind of look at that sort of universe and see basically where there is any improvements. What could we learn from them, and could we take this and apply that right across the field? And that's basically what I did do. So I looked at the best of the best, see what they were doing, and then I looked at the worst of the worst and see what they were doing. And one thing is for sure, we didn't have really any systematic approach to the whole thing. There was nothing unified. We had salesperson A, I'm not going to give that person a quote unless they come in and see me. Salesperson B, I'm not going to call the person, I'm going to send an email and see if they get back. And there was all different types of responses. So my job was to find basically the best practices and then bring something in and see if we can improve the results. So over a period of time, we went from a 12% overall, and they were pretty competent people, knew what they were doing as far as the overall business went, and we brought that up to 26% over a period of time. So I'm going to talk about some of the stuff I learned from that, and also from my job at Appraisee right now as well. So let me just jump on to my PowerPoint here, and that's going to help me through this. So as I said to you, one of the things is that when I found out from is you really got to take a systematic approach to this. And all this stuff that you will do, maybe in the 10 points that I'm going to talk about right now, is just only going to bring maybe incremental improvements to the overall business. So what that means is that, if you're sitting at the moment and maybe you've got a 10% closing ratio, then maybe when you introduce all these sort of things, you might get it up to 15%. Same if you're at 5% at the moment, might bring that up as well, up to 10%. But one thing is for sure, if you take this on board and you be systematic about it, you're definitely going to make improvements to your business. So before I talk about all of that, I just want to talk about what it was like in the good old days. And I'm sure we'll all remember in the good old days where the vast majority of our customers came into us and it was great, so we had complete control of the customer. And they came in at the time and they wanted to get basically information on the vehicle, which we were able to provide. They'd come in and want to check out the selection, which we were able to show them. They want to do a test drive, no problem. As they want to do a trade appraisal, of course, we had them covered on that. And of course, for financing, not only could they go to their bank, but they could do all the financing with us as well. And it was great. And the vast majority of that business at that time was walk-in. And then of course you might get a small little business came from referrals, maybe phone, but walk-in was the majority of it. And the close rate on this business was absolutely phenomenal. So that's great. And I think everybody will agree that's kind of how the old model of car sales was been. And then of course came the internet, and then slowly but surely more and more people started doing more shopping online, more research. And pretty much nowadays, someone can jump online and they can get all the information that they want. So that just like they can if they come to see you. They can check out all the selection they want. In fact, they can jump on every dealer's website, check out exactly what they have in stock at that moment in time, and get a really good idea of what's out there in the marketplace. They can get their trade appraisals done online nowadays. They can get their financing done online. And pretty much the only thing that they can't get done online is a test drive. And I know from my own experience, there's plenty of customers out there that will buy a car without even test driving it. So that big advantage just seems to be gone now, and that's for sure because customers can get so much of that information online. Now, lead volume, of course, as I said, walk-ins have gone down. And one thing I experienced myself is certainly over maybe a 5-year period, we've seen our walk-ins go down as much as by 56%. And what we did see go up, of course, was our online basically business. So we got more and more online leads. And of course, we get all these leads through different sources. We get it from our website. We would get them from Facebook campaigns, Google campaigns. Of course, you got your typical car market, sites, like Done Deal, for example, here, Cars Ireland. And no matter which way, we get tons and tons of leads come from there, but the close rates are never as good. They just aren't. And I know we can argue some are better than the others, but overall, compared to that walk-in, the close rate is never going to be that good. And we know why that is. We ultimately don't have the same control over our customer. So we're not able to control the sale. We're not able to present our value and do all the nice things we're able to do because everything is kind of out there online. So what does it mean? Well, if you think about it this way, lead volume walk-in, most of us, our experience is going down year on year. And then our increase on the online side of it. So what does it mean to us at the end of the day? Well, I said earlier on that I took the business that we had a 12% closing ratio, and then I got it to 26%. Well, guess what? We didn't see any increase in our bottom line as far as business went because of lead volume was increasing year on year. The best I could do is keep things flat. So by increasing the closing ratio on the online leads, only meant that I was offsetting what we were losing on the walk-in. That's all it was to it. But there's no doubt this is the way the business is going. And whether we like it or not, more and more people are going to be shopping online. More and more people are getting their information online. And we've got to be able to cater for them. And the business that do cater for these customers and take care of them are the ones that are going to win at the end of the day. So now I'm going to talk about obviously something that's very, very important when you are dealing with someone with an online lead. And that's just putting yourself in their shoes and imagine what it's like to be them. Because there's so many statistics out there where they are on their car buying journey. And what I mean by that is that there's a lot of statistics out there that are saying people can take up to 6 months when shopping for a car. Or, for example, when I saw pulled off online yesterday was 50% of buyers researched for more than a month. But whatever way you look at it, there's people out there that are researching, and whether they're on day one of buying the car or they're ready to pull the trigger or they're on day 50 or whatever that journey is for them, your job is when you get that lead to be able to call that person, try to determine where they are. If they're just starting out, you got to give them the information. If they're, ready to pull the trigger, then inviting them to come to the dealer, taking the test drive, doing the finance or whatever that is, they might be more receptive of. So that's something you want to keep in mind as well. But one thing is true, and it's straight across the line, and it involves same thing with face-to-face it is online. Our customers are generally driven by two things. And you have one customer and you got need customers. So our need customers, we're familiar with them. They're the people who've got a breakdown. Maybe they have got a car got into an accident. Maybe they got a new job. They've got a growing family. But the bottom line, when a need customer is, their time frame is going to be shorter. So when we, get on the phone, talk to these customers, we determine where they are. If they're need orientated, we can still use that to our advantage. We can still use that as a reason for them to come in and see us so they can tie things up and get themselves driving sooner rather than later. The one that's always been harder to do is basically that one customer. And that one customer, as we know, is a more aspirational buyer. And that customer is probably driving something nice at the moment. And they're toying with the idea of maybe buying something else. But that's not a done deal yet. So we know those people generally going to be in the marketplace for longer as they look around and try and figure out reasons why they should go ahead and purchase. And I think this is the one we lose a lot of the business on, because when we call these sort of lead, then, we find out that they're not ready to dance, they're not ready to kind of do what we want them to do. They're just looking for information. We're ready to kind of burn and turn them. So the bottom line is, want customers just as they are in face-to-face are long-time leads they are. And if you take care of them over that longer period, you will see them and they will turn into sales for you. So the first thing, and this is the most important thing when it comes to one of these selling strategies, and that is to strike while the iron is hot. And I know most of us have heard this before, but it's so important when it comes to online leads. Because I guarantee you we've all heard this before. I mean, how many times have you called a lead after a period of time and they said, I don't remember sending that in, or, it wasn't me, or it must have been somebody else. And you're just kind of looking at them going, right, well, they're the one that sent the lead in. And the reason why we hear this response so often is because maybe a bit of buyer's remorse has set in. I think we've all been there. We get a bit impulsive, then we suddenly think, maybe this is a good idea. And then we're jumping on, we're leaving, we want someone to contact us. And then if they take their sweet time to contact us, then we kind of talk ourselves out of it, a bit of buyer's remorse. Or maybe we took too long to get back to the prospect that somebody else has got a hold of the customer in the meantime. And now they'd rather tell us a little lie about how it must have been somebody else or it wasn't them, because they'd rather tell us that lie rather than tell us the truth that they've moved on with another dealer, because they want to avoid confrontation. They just don't want to get into an argument. But whatever the reasons is, one thing is for sure, leads will go cold quickly. That's just the way it is. Whether it's buyer's remorse, whatever the reasons, that is just a fact. And when somebody has an itch, it needs scratching. And there's so much data and proof of this, that leads contact within a certain period of time, are bound to engage. So for example, one of them, if they're contacted within 1 hour, I think they're 7 times more likely to engage. And another one I read the other day is that if you contact within 15 minutes, you're 3 times more likely to close them. But that's why it's so important to get a hold of your prospect as soon as the lead comes in. And before you get into, I know it's not always possible, but I just want you to keep that in mind. So one thing is to consider is, how did the automotive sector do in the whole? Now, some of these figures I think might be kind of pre-COVID, before we really accelerated this online sort of thing. But generally right now, at the moment, franchise dealers take about an average about 9 hours to get back. And I know this includes weekends and so on and so forth, but that's about the average that takes them. And then when you take that independent and add that back into, on average, car dealers take about 24 hours to get back to a customer, and they do. And in fact, customers report about 18% and believe they never got back to them in the first place. The time is 1 hour. If you can get a hold of somebody within 1 hour, then you have really is golden here. 15 minutes would even be better. And I hear you, it's not possible, especially if you're a one-man army and you're going to be folding your arms right now saying that's not possible. And I get all of that. But whatever you're trying to do is make that commitment to get back to people as soon as possible. Now, there's a couple of little things you can do that can kind of help you, especially with weekends, maybe out of business hours, where it's not possible to get back to somebody. And that's just basically set some sort of expectation with the customer. So for example, something you can do, and it's completely free of charge, and that is you can just basically set up like an out of office system. And you can set this up on Gmail, you can set it up on Outlook, and it's absolutely free to do this. And you can just set up, like I have an example here, you can just send replies automatically to the certain email address. And for example, this one says, easy car sales, thanks you for your inquiry. We will be in contact with you very shortly. And if you have inquired after business hours, we will be in touch as soon as we return. And then you have the business hours down there. But all you're doing here is you're managing that customer's expectation. So they get an email back straight away, and they know that you've got the email and you will be in contact with them. That's all. Now, there's more sophisticated ways to do this, and I'm not plugging anybody in particular, but Rapid RTC, there's another company called iTrack, and there's a bunch of other companies out here can kind of manage this, but manage your third-party ones, because you can get leads from third-party sources that aren't coming directly from the customer. So that automated email won't work in that case. But this allows you then basically to specialize, where you can take a third party, it reads the lead, knows where it came from, and will send a message out on your behalf. And if it comes from certain sources, then you can kind of granularize that. If it's about a trade, then you can get back with a trade message and so on. If it's a finance, you can go back with a finance message. But there are ways to manage that business, and there is an inexpensive way to do that. Now, the next thing that's going to give you a big bang for your buck is just to consider that one size doesn't fit all. And I know this is kind of very logical, this is, but different sources, different campaigns require different answers or different responses. So if a customer comes in on a finance inquiry, then you should have a response built up for that. Same if it's a trade, or it's a new vehicle or a used vehicle or a test drive. And I know this is logical, but it is important that you respond back to the person. And in the more specific the response, the better it is for them. A thing to consider is, and again, you might be able to do this if you're a one-man show, for example, or a one-person show, but you might want to direct to the salesperson who's best suited for the inquiry. So if you have a salesperson who's very good at trades, very good at taking care of a customer on that level, then that's the person you probably should hand the inquiry over to. If someone's better on the finance, and that'd be the case on there. But another thing you might want to consider, and this is something I did, for example, is you might want to look at maybe taking somebody who's more specialized at it. And what I mean by that is that I talked about earlier on how we had salespeople, some were closing at 3%, closing at 20%, and we were looking at what they were doing. But part of that as well was getting down to that salesperson. So we had certain salesperson who had no hesitation about picking up the call. And it's not like they're cold calling. I mean, they're calling an inquiry, but they were good at that. They had the patience of a saint, and they didn't mind and understood that there might be 18 touch points, but they were fine about selling that person to come into the dealership, and they had good mannerisms and a good way to do that. And then I had top salespeople, people who were absolutely brilliant at selling, were absolutely useless when it came to this business. Just had no interest in whatsoever, didn't want to pick up the phone, just didn't like it at all. And in fact, what I would do is I would make sure that in certain locations where I could afford to, is I would send only the web leads to the people who I knew they were going to take care of the customer. And I didn't care if it was a top salesperson or not. As far as I'm concerned, this wasn't the type of business. And that's something you could consider, like I said, is maybe looking at bringing in a specialist or training somebody who is going to have, as I said, the patience of a saint, or is going to have the ability to be able to follow up on this and not think back about, it's so much easier when they're face to face, and really has that attitude. So the next one, and there's another one's going to give you a bang for the buck, is to quote or not to quote. And I think right now, okay, it's a little bit different, the marketplace, where prices are out there, and it's kind of, before it was like, give us your best price, and people will be hesitant about giving the best price or giving the trade price or doing these sort of things. Because I know deep down inside, if one thing that we've been taught in sales is for example, is that we want to explain our value before we give a price. Someone walks onto a dealership and starts pointing at all the cars, how much is that, how much is that? You rattling off the price doesn't mean anything, because they have no idea what the value is behind it. Because we could all be cynical. We could boil down a car to all cars got four wheels and a steering wheel and got an engine, and they get you from A to B. So if you were that cynical about it, then we wouldn't understand why someone's paying 60,000 euros for one vehicle and 5,000 for the next. So we know it's important to be able to justify our value. But unfortunately, when it comes to this sort of business on there, those people have done a lot of research. They kind of know what they're looking for. So we don't have to worry about it so much. And I know with the business the way it is at the moment, the prices are being advertised are pretty much the prices of the vehicle, because there's not a lot of supply, and it's either take it or leave it. But the reality is, at some stage, there's going to be new cars come back into the marketplace. Used cars are going to come readily available, and it's going to get more competitive. So when it comes to that sort of business on there, it's still important that you try and stay competitive. So a rule of thumb for sure that still works is get on the phone and call the customer. And I think there's everybody out there knows that this is still the best practice. So it's very important you get on the phone and you try and call that person. And of course, you're trying to determine where they are in their journey. Are they in need? Are they a want customer? And then you're trying to determine, can you sell them an appointment? Can you sell them to come in and do a test drive? Can you sell them to come in to do an appraisal on their vehicle? Can you sell them to come in and talk about the financing? That's your first line. Now, if you can't, obviously the next thing you need to do is think about, should I be putting my best price out there? Should I be giving them a trade price online? But the bottom line is, if you don't, someone else will. That's as sure as it gets. And you know yourself, think about it. If you're dealing with someone who doesn't want to give you a price and someone who does, who's going to earn your business? With a person who is transparent. And I think that's the key to this, is if you can't sell them coming into you, and there's two things you need to be. One is you need to have a competitive price, and the other part is you've got to be transparent. And if you are, you're going to succeed more often. So they're the three sort of key ones for me when it comes to strategy. And if you really take that on board, you're going to see big results straight away. So I'm going to cover some small ones with you right now, easy to implement and easy to do. So the next one is, and this is pretty straightforward, this is just be optimistic. And I hear a lot of times when I talk to my own appraisee customers, ask them how they get on with the leads, and some of them can be quite pessimistic when it comes to this sort of business. The so-and-so's a time waster, and this person's going to take my price and shop me somewhere else. You got to be optimistic. You got to get on the phone and call that person. That's why I said a specialist is so important. But if it's your one-man show or one-person show, then you're going to make sure that you'll be able to jump on the phone and be able to do this and be optimistic at the same time. The next thing to keep an eye on, and this is something that's important, is if you can maybe call from a landline. Because I think a lot of people at the moment see mobile phones, don't know if they're getting spammed, are worried, and it won't answer from them. So I think it's important, if you can call from a landline, then people then can see it's a landline, maybe figure out it's a local number or where it's from, and can infer from there and from their inquiry maybe where it's coming from, and you got a bigger chance they'll answer the phone for you. Another thing you could do is, and I know this works very well, is consider maybe sending your customer a text beforehand. This is another way, if you only have a mobile number, for example, and that's how you operate, then maybe you send them a text beforehand. So you have a little text saying, hey, how you doing? Thanks for your inquiry. I'll be calling you in the next 15 minutes and to talk to you. So at least then when you call, they know. Now, that person comes back and says, sorry, I can't talk right now. I'm at work. Can you call me tonight at 6 o'clock? And then great. Then you made contact and you know what you got to do. If you call that person, there's no answer at 12 o'clock. And then you genuinely try to call the person back at 5 o'clock and still no answer, then maybe it's time to put it away, because they've got the text, they see the 2 missing calls, and if they don't want to engage with you, then maybe then it's time to either send them an email or move on to the next person. Okay. So another thing is that you could do is you also could let them know what number you'll be calling from. And again, if you go back to that automated response, you could put that in there. You could say, hi, thanks very much for, your inquiry. Jimmy or Mary is going to be calling you from this phone number. And this is another way where you can set that expectation with your client as well. And then another one is important for you is that I think when you look at this web business, I think you should constantly always be trying to make small changes just to see where the improvements will be made, and then to take that time to review your analytics and go back and have a look at it. Because, as they say, the definition of madness is to keep doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And then if I move into the ninth one here, is this is important, and I don't know how many dealers are really taking full advantage. I know the bigger ones are, but it's very important to stay in touch. And I'm not talking about long-term follow-up on there and having a reason to call. And this is definitely important, especially if you're done with face-to-face. But if you've dealt with a person, you've sent them the information and they still haven't got back to you, put them into some sort of database that has some sort of automated follow-up system. And even if it's only a pleasant email planned out over weeks, 2 weeks, and then another one over 2 weeks over that, as that person might be on a 6-month journey, they may very well, because they've been getting some nice little interaction from you, put you basically top of mind when it comes time to pulling the trigger. So it's definitely important. You've got the tools, and again, there's lots of free software out there or inexpensive software that will allow you to automate this and make a system for it. And then final one on for you as well is, don't be afraid to experiment with different sources. I know a lot of people are very hardcore and they say, I only want to spend the money on certain areas and I don't want to go through other leads because those leads aren't so good. But one of the things that was always pointed out to me when I was in sales is that everybody was a walking car deal. And they may not be sufficiently disturbed to come in and do anything about it. But if you meet them on the street, find out what they're driving, and they're driving a 6 or 7 year old car and it's got 100,000 on the clock, and you can get them something new or something else for whatever, you find a lot of people are much more receptive they are. They're just not sufficiently disturbed. And that's why sometimes if you're out there, Facebook, or you're on your different campaigns and you're landing leads in front of people that normally wouldn't be looking at it, it's a way of engaging people. These leads come true. Maybe they're not as hot as someone who's on a car market website that is really narrowed and really looking for something in particular. But yes, if you're already invested in this business, you might find that these lead sources are good and they will get you results. You might have to recall a few more of them, but it's definitely a different way to look at the business they are. So that's my 10 tips for you. I know for a fact if you bring a few of them in and start doing them, you're going to start seeing some better results. So I want to talk to you right now about the appraisee side of my business on here. And one of the products I mentioned earlier on that I think might be of interest in is something called Price My Car. And Price My Car is kind of born out of some statistics that's important to understand kind of people's behaviors when they are shopping online. And if you look at the top 5 activities, so one is when people are shopping online, they're looking for the actual car. So that's pretty straightforward. They have a car in mind and they're out there looking for that. And that's 71% of the time. 68% of the time, people out there comparing different models. Again, they're narrowing down their choices. They're looking at A, looking at B, and they want to see the difference between them, maybe reading reviews and so on. But a third thing that's very interesting is they want to find out what their current vehicle is worth. So that makes a lot of sense, obviously. Probably for most dealers, 70% of people have got a trade-in. And for them, it could be the equity, down payment on their next vehicle. They've got a note on it. They need to get rid of that in order to move into the next vehicle. So there's so many reasons why it's so important. And as I said, it's a big one, 64%. Then you got locating a dealer, ready to pull the trigger. Where's the nearest dealers? And or getting dealer info as well as another one. So what Price My Car does is caters to those people who want to know what their trade is worth. They're very important, that 64% of people who are out there shopping online. And what we do basically is we offer kind of a special sort of lead generating tool that can work on your website. It can work as part of any of your online campaigns, or you can send it directly to a customer as well. And one thing we know from Cars Ireland and all the customers we got with Cars Ireland, generally about 1.2% of your website visitors will leave a lead when they use, what's my trade worth, the widget that we have. So if you've got 3,000 visitors a month, then you expect probably about 30 odd leads a month. And generally these leads are, we would say they're good quality, they're easy to follow up on, and they might be a source of vehicles for resale as well, because guess what, they've all got a trade on them as well. So generally that person will be on your website, looking at the different cars you've got in stock, and they're thinking to themselves, that's fine, I wonder what they pay me for my vehicle. And lo and behold, there is, what's my trade worth? And what they do is they click that. They're asked to put in their name, their phone number, put in their license plate, put in some mileage, and tell what vehicle they're interested in, and also upload some pictures of the vehicle. And what you instantaneously get is reads the plate. So then you get all the lookup data, get the evaluations if you're hooked up to that. You can actually even get more information as well. Get the name, the phone number, what they're interested in. You get the photos of the vehicle. Pretty much everything you need to give that person a call and kind of find out where they are. And essentially, it's going to give you 2 options. One is it gives you an option to sell them a vehicle, because that's what they're doing. They're looking at something you have in stock and they're telling you what they got to trade. And maybe that's an extra revehicle for you to put in and replenish your inventory. Or for example, it's something you're not going to sell to yourself and you're going to pass it on to the trade. And it also has what we call a trader bid platform. So it has the ability to be able to select that vehicle, send it off to the various traders you work, and then they will get it in a text message. They open that up, and then very simply, then they can then basically click that and then basically put a price on it, no problem. And then you can look back 24 hours later and you can see exactly basically what the prices were offered on there. So no difference. Just like we spoke about earlier on, the lead comes in and your job is to call that person, and you're going to do what you're going to do. So you're going to try and sell that person coming in, do the appraisal so they give them a price, or maybe you're going to offer them a test drive, come on in and I'll do the proper appraisal while you're off, driving your car, and then you can come back and we'll be able to put a deal together. Or maybe, same thing, you want to talk about the financing and go through all the different various things that you can do to help them get out of their car and get into the other vehicle. But whatever that is going to be your first line, and it's going to work every time. Now, other thing that you can do with Price My Car, and this is the one where you get a lot of folded arms, and I know dealers who've been successful with this, what they do is they're not afraid to give some sort of valuation online. So you're going to call that person, aspirational, just want to know what they think you're going to buy for their vehicle. Obviously, you can't really tell them, but you can give them a range. So there's no harm in it. If you can't get him in, you can always send him a range. You can say, look, I know, based on this and this, it's worth between 47 and 57. Obviously, that's not a done deal till we come in and check it out, but I'll give you an idea. And of course, it depends on the vehicle you're looking at. We might be able to do something for you extra on it, but we really need you to come by to do that. But in the meantime, here's what I think it's worth. And, we can talk about those details when that time comes. So again, just gives you the ability to be able to engage with that person, not spend a huge amount of time because it has a built-in valuations into it, but also deal with that person as well. Now, Price My Car comes with a lot of other nice little tools as well. One thing that's great, it puts everything in one place. So it doesn't matter if you're sending the appraisal straight to a customer because they've called and you want to send it on to them, or it's coming, from, like I said, different sites. It's going to put everything into one central area, and you're going to see the whole universe of all your trades coming in. So which is really handy. And then you can work them just like you can with a DMS system. You can mark them basically where, they've come in, they've turned into a deal, or they're not going anywhere. And it might be a repository of you trying to remember back, says, you know what, we had a vehicle like this, and then you remember it and you give that person a call, and maybe you make a deal in the future because you've got somebody on the hook who's interested in it. But whatever it does, allows you to have everything in one central place, something that you can use over and over again. It's completely GDPR compliant, so it doesn't matter if you've got salespeople who are WhatsApping customers and the photos and all the rest of it. They can still WhatsApp the link to the customer completes the link, and then it makes sure you have no GDPR issues, because if that person leaves, it's not on their phone, it's all centralized under lock and key. As I said, it has real-time access, not just the vehicle variant and NCT and tax expiry, but you also can hook it up to vehicle valuation and finance and history checks. And another thing that's important with it is you can see the lead source, and this works really well, especially on the Cars Ireland sites, because you can actually see exactly what page the customer was on when they left that lead. So whether they're on your home page or they were looking at a specific unit you've got in stock, they can see that. And again, when you have that lead in your hand, you can see all the data and you can match that up and you can see what page they left the lead. It just gives you a little bit more, ammunition so you can make a call and know a little bit more about it. So there you are, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. This is pretty much everything as far as the appraisee side of it. What I'll do is I'll put a link in the description to a kind of bullet points of what I spoke about. And I hope to be hearing from you soon. Thanks again.